back to another edition of Inside Plano, the city's podcast. I'm Shannah, Hayley, Director of Communications. With me, of course, the one and only Amanda McNew, Director of Media Relations. We are super excited today. We have two great guests with us. First, Tejasvi Manoj, who is a student living in Plano. We have lots of exciting things to talk about. And Officer Jerry Minton, who you might also know as the Public Information Officer for Plano Police Department. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Tejasvi, let's start out. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, hi, my name is Tejasvi. I'm currently a senior in high school, and recently, last year, I was named the 2025 Time Kid of the Year.
It's just a little something. You were also a TEDx Plano speaker, which I think is also pretty awesome, but Time Magazine, my gosh. Okay, so the logical question is, why did Time Magazine name you Kid of the Year?
So they named me Kid of the Year because of my work with older adults to help them with cybersecurity. Essentially, I created an application that uses AI to help older adults and educate them in cybersecurity, whether that is identifying scams through an AI tool that allows them to input images of any like text messages or emails, and then that AI will identify whether it's a scam or not, as well as a chatbot that is essentially designed specifically for older adults in a language that they understand. And I also went out to different retirement communities around Plano and I guess around North Texas and talked a little bit about cybersecurity and why it's important and what they can do to stay safe online.
Okay.
Wow. Pretty cool. So all of this started because of something that happened with your grandfather. Can you tell us about that story, how this all started?
So I was driving home with my dad one day when we got a text essentially that my grandfather had almost been scammed. And it was pretty shocking to me, especially because I had known him to be very financially responsible. He was very, very careful when it came to his credentials and his finances. So when I found out that something like that happened to him specifically, I was a little bit in shock. And then I actually saw the message of him getting the message that almost scammed him, and it seemed so easily identifiable to me, but it wasn't to him. So how it started out was I wanted to find something to help him, so I went online and I did my little research. And what I found was that this wasn't just a problem for him, this was a problem for so many other older adults out there where they were getting tricked by the simplest of scams because they didn't have this basic digital safety education. So when I found that out and when I couldn't really find anything to help him in specific, I decided to create my own application, Shield Seniors.
So Officer Minton, how common are these types of scams for senior adults, particularly in Plano, North Texas area?
Well, first off, thank you for doing what you did. Because unfortunately, it's something that was very needed simply because it is very common. We get several reports every week on scams being perpetrated against senior adults. I say senior adult, anybody at any age they get scammed, but the seniors seem to be more vulnerable because they're on a fixed income, and these scammers go after everything that they have, and they could care less. Mm-hmm. And because of the age differences, the older generation didn't grow up with electronics like you did. So they're more easily deceived electronically. If it was a face-to-face conversation, they could probably deal with it a little bit better because that's what they're used to. But electronics threw a whole new curveball to them.
So when you're talking to these victims of scams like this, what do you see emotionally from the victims, especially for older adults?
Shame is the big one. A lot of times it's a difficult situation for them to report because they don't want to be seen as number one, as a victim, and they also don't want their family to think that they can't take care of themselves financially. So those are two very big hurdles to get past, the shame and then not being able to take care of themselves. So it's difficult for them to report it, first of all, and then a lot of times, unfortunately, because if they get older in age, they don't have very good memory issues. So it is difficult.
So let's talk a little bit about Shield Seniors. So how does it work? How did you build in a process for teaching basic digital education?
Yeah, so I wanted to create an application that any older adult could use because one of the main problems I found out was that, at least in my grandfather's situation, my grandma was there, my aunt and uncle were there to help him. But what if they weren't there? They were the ones who warned him that this was a scam and that he shouldn't reply to this. But if they weren't there, he would have ended up losing so much of his money. So one of my main goals was to create digital independence with dignity. I wanted to make sure that older adults would be able to feel independent online and safe. And as mentioned, I wanted to make sure that they didn't feel ashamed of the fact that they got scammed. I wanted to make sure that they knew that this is something that, you know, they could learn about, and this is not something to be ashamed of because it happens to everyone, and it's just important that they now know like the basics. So I wanted to create an AI application, and I essentially did not know anything about how to use AI. So I went to Google, I went to YouTube, and I searched up how can I implement AI models, and I worked on my application throughout the summer of 2 years ago, I believe. And I just worked and I tested my program and I watched so many tutorials on YouTube. And I was kept on getting like 404 error messages, like it just was not working. I had to do a lot of debugging and trials. But in the end, I was able to finally build the AI application. And how it works is there are essentially 4 main parts. So the first part is the learn part, where I just give some of the basic fundamental cybersecurity information, like how to stay safe on social media, how to spot certain scams, how to create strong passwords, which is very important, and just some basic fundamental things that older adults can do and that anyone can do. And then the second part is the Ask section, which is a chatbot that specifically is designed for older adults. Because if you use ChatGPT or Gemini or any other chatbot and you type in how to stay safe online or what is phishing, they will give you this very long, lengthy, hard to understand response. So my goal was to make a chatbot that was specifically designed for older adults with just 2 to 3 lines, maybe the basic fundamental information, and just make it easier for them to understand. And then the next section is the Analyze section, where, as I mentioned, older adults can input screenshots of their text messages or emails or any messages that they get, and the AI will then analyze whether it's a scam or not, will tell you why it's a scam, which is also very important. It's important to know the why the AI recognizes it's a scam, and then how to prevent yourself from going through something like this again. So it doesn't just protect, it also educates. And then the last section is the report section. I found out that not very many older adults actually report their scams. So after finding that out, I wanted to create something that just makes it very, very easy for older adults to just click on a link and report their scam. And I also wanted to remind them again that they have a community of people, that they are not alone in this situation at all, that there are so many people that are out there to help them and support them and to just, they want the best for them. So that's the last section, the report section, and that's Shield Seniors.
Wow.
Well, it's really incredible. I mean, we talk about being a victim of a crime, you're really thinking of theft and money, but what you're creating is really more about dignity and confidence for older adults.
Yeah, exactly. We want to make sure that, you know, they don't feel too ashamed, that they really like that independence. You know, they don't want to, obviously they know that there's a community behind them, but once they get with that community, they also want to, you know, be by themselves as well. So I think it's really important to give them that autonomy.
So from a law enforcement perspective, we're talking about this challenge of getting people to report. What are you seeing when victims do come forward? What's happening to them emotionally? How does law enforcement work through the process of victims advocacy?
Okay. When they come across with us, they're usually with family members that are helping them out to understand things. But they usually have a lot of details. They don't delete their messages most of the time. So we have a lot of the conversations that are going on. So that helps us out a lot so that we can try to backtrace where the suspects are coming from, whether they're local or overseas or in another country. One of the biggest things that we can recommend for families is you have to support them. We can support them on our side, letting them know that they are victims of a crime, and the persons that perpetrated this against them, they're professionals, and this is their 9-to-5 job. They have training for it. They're raised by families, depending on if they're from another country or not. But they do have training courses to commit fraud against elderly people, so it's passed on from person to person. So we try to comfort them as much as possible, let them know that they did absolutely nothing wrong, but they fell victim to a professional con man like anybody of any age from 18 on up would do. So it's sad because they blame themselves for it. They feel ashamed. And it almost, to them, I think a lot of them, it feels like a physical assault on them. They're very vulnerable at that point. And a lot of times it destroys their own will or ability to be themselves.
I mean, you mentioned, these are older adults on a fixed income, and I think one thing that's important to remind people is that you're also past your earning potential. So it's not like this is an easily recoverable crime, too, which is probably feeding into a lot of that emotion.
Absolutely, it sure is. And one of the reasons why the elderly or the older generation is targeted is because they've worked their entire lives, and most of them have saved up a pretty good sum of money. So that's why they target them. It's easy money, and then once that's gone, it's gone.
So can you talk about some of the red flags, easy red flags that people can watch out for, especially for seniors? If there's, if you could bullet point kind of a list for them, easy things to spot, what would you say those would be?
Okay, one of the first ones, and it's a common practice for the scammers to send text messages. If it's an out-of-the-country area code, it's like a +1, and then it's got another set of numbers. Could range anywhere from 12 to 16 digits long. That's going to be a scam. 100% that's going to be a scam because no U.S. business or entity is going to call you from an out-of-the-country area code. And also, if they're making threats, a lot of the scammers will pose as government agencies or officers, police officers, sheriff's department, even chiefs of police, and tell you have warrants for your arrest. And then you can send us the money by Venmo, gift card, or things like that. No legitimate government entity is going to take anything through Venmo. They're not going to do you a gift card. The IRS does not want an Apple iTunes gift card. And those are normally the most common ways that they scam these people out of. Because what the scammers will do, they'll flip those cards and sell them online for maybe 75 cents on a dollar. And so they may lose 25 cents on a card, but they didn't pay for it anyway. So they don't care.
Yeah, it's scary how easy it is when you have that fear of something could be wrong, that you're not in your right mind if you're fearing. And Tejasvi, that was kind of your grandfather, right, too? He was worried that it was a loved one who needed help.
Yeah, it was the scam. That he thought that my uncle had sent a text message that he needed money, so he was about to send it. But then luckily my grandma was like, "Wait, just ask one more time." My uncle, and it turns out that it was a scammer. So I think it's very easy to manipulate older adults' emotions and their kind of good hearts into these scams, and I think that's why it's also probably easier to scam them as well.
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the most common ones. We call it the grandparent scam, because most of the time the suspects are posing as the grandson or the granddaughter, either by text or by phone, saying that they've been arrested, something serious has happened. He can't really give you any information, and then they're setting the hook. The grandson or the grandchild is the bait, and then the story is the hook, and then it depends on whether or not the grandparent falls for it.
I was just thinking, so many emotions are involved, panic, short term, you've got to act quickly, and so you're not able to think clearly because your emotions do take over. So let's say somebody does get scammed. What should they do? We've mentioned report, but let's talk about from the law enforcement side.
Don't be shy when you talk to the police department, because we're going to ask some sensitive questions dealing with the scam, and you may feel embarrassed. Maybe things you don't want to talk about, something you don't want to relive, but we have to have that information. Once you find out that you have been scammed, take good notes, make copies of everything that you have, bank records, bank transfers, not only on your end on it, but also where you sent the money to. We need the phone numbers, we need the account numbers and the routing numbers, because without those numbers, the case is a dead end. And we have been quite successful on recovering some of the money that's been scammed. We're getting better at it simply because, thanks to people like her, people are reporting it a little bit more, and we're also being reported faster, and banking and financial institutions are coming along and spotting it as well a lot faster. So they can stop it on their end some, but when the transactions go through, we have an opportunity, but it's a very short window to recover some of these funds for these individuals.
Are you seeing, I was thinking like how you could participate in a scam without realizing it if you see a gift card on sale, get it cheaper than the face value. I mean, I would assume that that's probably highly likely that could have been a stolen gift
Correct.
card.
And those are there are websites that sell gift cards like that are unused. Say if someone gets a gift card in the mail by a family member where they don't have that restaurant in their location, so they'll never use it, so they'll repost it, resell it. But the scammers have figured that out too. And so they'll sell it that way. And we can trace it back through the card number if the victim has that number to where it was used at and maybe who have purchased it. But they're also considered a kind of a victim witness on their end if they actually purchased it legitimately.
Interesting.
So what do you suggest for relatives to do to help their family members? I know having a mother who is getting older in age, I can talk to her all day about these scams and tell her what I've seen. I don't know how much it actually makes a difference. As they get older and their brains just seem to change, what can people really do to help their loved ones as they age?
Stay in constant contact with them. There are, for emails, and because a lot of the scams come through emails as well, there are programs that you can put on computers so you can help monitor or at least gain access to their emails so you can monitor their emails. It still gives them freedom, but you can also kind of see what's going on. Kind of the same thing with some text messages. I know it sounds like you're babysitting, and in some form or fashion you probably are, but they still want their independence. So, if you can, try not to take their phones away from them unless it's absolutely the last resort. But be supportive of them. You have to talk to them and make sure that dialogue goes both ways, because a lot of times once the parent or the grandparent is scammed, their attitude changes. So look for differences in attitude. Not only could it be medical, but it could also be being a victim as well. And that's very common. If they start missing very important engagements, graduations, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, and they don't have an excuse for it, they just say, well, I had business to do. I was running errands, and that's out of character for them, then press harder, get nosy, and don't give up, because it's the ones that the family may give up and don't want to give them their independence is when the scam continues to go on.
That's great advice.
It really is. And some of that's also just practicalities too. I was thinking, also older parents, and, we talk about the wisdom of being on a bank account just for practical reasons. And
Correct.
that can also help, because then you could monitor what's happening in a bank
Right,
account.
and if you can gain access, or not gain access, but at least be on their account as a user, if, say, they ever have to go in for a medical procedure, you have access to their account to pay for their services. So it goes both ways.
Makes perfect sense. Well, I want to shift just a little bit, because I'm super curious, as it was happening all right after TEDx Plano. What was it like when you got the call that you were named Time Magazine's Kid of the Year?
So I knew that I was going to be on the Time website at least, because I had done the interview actually in the Plano Public Library. I did my interview and photo shoot in the Davis Library, so that was pretty cool. And I just knew that I was going to be on the website, and I was already really excited about that, and I was anticipating it. So the day before was when I got the information. School had just ended, and we have the phone ban, right? The Texas phone ban, so I wasn't really on my device, so I didn't know. So I turned on my phone and I see an influx of messages from Time, and I'm like, oh, okay, my article is going to come out soon. I click on one of the links, And it says, congratulations, you're the 2025 Time Kid of the Year. You're going to be on the cover of Time magazine. You're going to be on the cover of Time for Kids. And I just absolutely black out. And I end up missing my bus. So then I'm worried about, okay, I have to figure out how to go home now. But yeah, I honestly could not believe it. I think it's because I just wasn't expecting it at all. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, oh my God, like what's going on? And I was scrolling through my emails and I just saw so much more information. Like you're getting interviewed by, I think I got interviewed by CNN the next day, CNN International. So I was just thinking, oh my God, my life is going to change. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the next day, everything came out. A lot of like my old teachers reached out to me the next day, which was really cool to see. Like my third grade teacher, like my first teachers here in Texas were like reached out to me. So that was very cool. And it was just so overwhelming and crazy. And I was so grateful. But I also remember thinking like, I have a test tomorrow. I need to do it. I need to study for it. Then I'll like think about it. But yeah, it was just insane.
It's awesome.
It is. So once you got that, did that change anything with your app or anything else?
Yeah, I was definitely getting a lot more support from my app, which was really nice. A lot of people were very interested in the idea. A lot of people were sending me their own stories about how their older loved ones got scammed. And I think what made me realize like how important this was is almost like, if not every single person who I've talked to about Shield Seniors would say something like, oh, I have someone who, like a loved one who also was about to get scammed or was also about to get, lose a lot of money online. And I just think the fact that every single person has this story, I think proves to how big of an issue this is. So yeah, as I mentioned, I was definitely getting a lot more support. I think something else that happened was, as I mentioned, I would do like talks at older adult homes, and a lot of people did not take me or would not let me do these talks because of my age, because I was a little too young. And then afterwards, I didn't really seem to have that problem anymore. So that was nice. But yeah,
So have you seen a strong reaction from the community? Have they started supporting you more? And what was the role that they played, do you think, in moving the app forward?
Yeah, so I would say that a lot of people definitely were offering me advice. A lot of like college professors were offering me like mentorship, which I always greatly appreciate. And I think a lot of people were just, I think the most important role was the support that they gave me. Obviously, like I was very happy doing Shield Seniors before that, but I think afterwards and seeing so many people's reactions and how kind they were and how genuine they were, it just made everything so much more, like it made it better, honestly. So I would definitely say that seeing everyone's reactions were just really nice, and it really pushed me forward and motivated me to keep on working towards my goals.
So you briefly mentioned college professors. Do you have plans for college?
Yes. So I'm going to be going to the UT Austin, and I'm going to be majoring in neuroscience plus computer science. So.
Well, what's next for the app?
Yeah. So as I think I was about to. I'm working on the app and trying to get it to the release date. I think because now so many more people are going to be using it because of all the engagement it's gotten. I want to make sure that the app is as good as possible and that I have all the proper implementations, all the proper securities, because as mentioned, I don't want to risk anyone's personal information. I think I've established, hopefully, that that's very important to me. So I think I'm just working on some of the final touches, but it should be ready soon, hopefully. So.
Perfect.
I think that's great.
Yeah, so Officer Minton, if we had, just a few minutes to talk to families and seniors directly, what is it that you would most want them to take away from the conversation today?
It would probably be, like I mentioned earlier, stay really close in touch with your parents. They took care of us while we were growing up. It's time for us to take care of them. And they may not want it. In fact, you'll probably get a lot of pushback for it. But if you love them, you're going to want that close-knit conversation with them, and you're going to want to get in their business, not to be intrusive, but to watch them. Okay? They can have their independence, but watch them. And the small things, like I said, their mannerisms, missing appointments, missing special things, those are all key indicators that something's not quite right going on behind the scenes. And they're going to tell you, no, everything's fine, but keep digging.
Tejasvi, I'll ask you the same question. What's one thing you'd like our seniors to know, or their loved ones?
So to the seniors, I want them to know that the community is here for them. We all want to help them. We all want to protect them. We all want to repay what they gave us. You know, they helped the past generations, and they're continuing now, and we want to help them as well. So I just think it's really important to know that we're not here to like belittle them or like be cruel to them. We're here to help them. We want to support them. You know, they have a community that is backing them up. We want to, you know, bring like more sunshine into their lives. And I think the digital world is can be so overwhelming at times. So it's always important to, I think, you know, accept help or even ask for help. I just think that's so important, and anyone would be willing to do it. And to their loved ones, I think, as you mentioned, I think we should just, you know, stay in touch with them, make sure to make them know that they are like, we love them and that we care for them and that we want to help them and we only want the best for them. So, yeah.
Well, thank
that's
you
great.
both for joining us. And I think we should note, Amanda, that our senior adult population is growing in Plano. It's not expected to peak until 2031, I believe, is what was last
that's pretty
reported
soon.
in a council meeting. So, I mean, it's a growing population group, and these are growing scams, as we're understanding from Officer Minton. So this is important and useful
Right.
information that we all need to know. But thank
Absolutely.
you again for joining the podcast, and
you.
thank you all
Thank
for joining us for another episode of Inside Plano. We'll see you next time.